Welcome in. It's Nick and friends. Welcome in. Happy Friday night. We're taking you through the 6 o'clock hour here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. Nick and friends, as always, want to shout out our good friends over at the Carpe Diem team at Nebraska Realty. Whether you're looking for a new place to call home or trying to sell your current home, you want to make it as easy as possible. So why not use a realtor that works hard so you don't have to? Give the Carpe Diem team at Nebraska Realty a call today, 402-429 8121 for all your residential and commercial needs. We've had a good couple of guests here over the last few weeks on the podcast, but now we're going to welcome in one that's looks a lot better than me in a tank top. And if you're on the stream, you can check it out, man. One of my good friends, Eddie Messel, formerly of 1011 News here in Lincoln, covered Huskers, covered the prep scene as well for a couple of years here in the state of Nebraska. Eddie, dude, it's been a long time. What's up, man?
Not much, Nick. It's good to talk to you again and good to catch up a little bit. Obviously, like you said, formerly 1011, so I actually just wrapped that up a little over 2 weeks ago now. So still here in Nebraska, here in Lincoln, trying to find out what's next. But definitely been a crazy couple weeks not working with how crazy the schedule gets over at 1011 and just local TV in general, running around doing all the, like you said, the Husker stuff, prep stuff. But the nice little break here has been kind of nice to catch your breath and kind of realize what it's like to be on a normal schedule again.
We're gonna definitely talk about like the Huskers bubble that as a media member you're kind of in. And it's like that makes it sound like a bad thing. It's not like necessarily a horrible thing. But you
No,
kind of just forget that there's other stuff going on outside of Nebraska athletics, whether that's high school sports or whether that's Husker football, because obviously like the fall. But first, before we dive really into like your time so far, because obviously your career is still going on, um, tell the people about you. I mean, because I know a little bit about you. Tell people where you're from, because obviously they see you on TV or see you out at games for 3 minutes or whatever at a time. Tell people about who Eddie Messel is.
Yeah, a little bit about me. Obviously, I think for anybody who's watched 1011, I drop hints all the time. They're always making fun of me with all the,
Yeah.
I'm a South Florida guy. I grew up in Miami. They're just outside of Miami, Pembroke Pines, Florida. I tell everybody Miami because no one knows where Pembroke Pines is. But
Yeah.
my parents actually live in downtown Miami right now, so still get to go back there all the time. Went to college in Florida, stayed in state, went to UCF, so. Spent my 4.5 years at UCF, and that was kind of my Nebraska connection because I was there for the whole Scott Frost, Frost thing. My freshman year was O'Leary, and people forget that we went 0-12, and it was the worst year of football I've ever had to be a part of in my entire life. Scott Frost came in, but yeah, wrapped up school there in at UCF and couldn't have asked for a better 4 years. Even outside of the football thing, the journalism program, my fraternity, the friends I met, just great program there. Grew up playing baseball my whole life. I know you're a big baseball guy too.
Oh, yeah.
So, did that in high school before UCF and, decided to just go the college route, hung up the cleats, all about that. So
Yeah, I do. Sadly.
we all got to give it up at some point. But yeah, and then, after college, I kind of took a leap of faith. Moved out to Bozeman, Montana for a sports anchoring job, and had never been, didn't visit, didn't know what I was getting myself into. I was coming from Florida, moving to Bozeman, Montana, and it was a little nerve wracking, but got out there, and I was 22 years old. So moved out there and honestly fell in love with Bozeman, man. What a great place for anybody who's listening. If you've never been to Montana or Bozeman, I mean, it is a phenomenal place. I suggest everybody should go see it. The national parks are great. Just everything about the state is fantastic. But yeah, spent my year and a half there, doing sports anchoring, getting the chance to cover Montana State and all the prep stuff there. Definitely not as intense as it was here. It was definitely different animal cover coming here to Lincoln, but loved my time in Bozeman. I learned a lot. I was by myself. I didn't really there was other sports guys, but they were in Missoula and they were part of our team, but I was basically by myself in Bozeman, fresh out of school, had to learn this entire new community. But I loved it. I'm an outgoing guy, so I got out in the community, as everybody here knows. I got out in the community there in Bozeman, loved it, and yeah, spent a year and 6 months there. And there was some turmoil a little bit with firings that happened. With I was fortunate to get fired, but fired our main anchor, and it turned into this. My
Mhm.
job kind of changed, and that's when I started looking for a chance to kind of get out and take that next step. And I got the opportunity to come here in Lincoln. Kevin Suits, the sports director, kind of gave me a shot, and moved out here, moved out to Lincoln in January of 2021. And then, yeah, just wrapped up my 2 years. So obviously, I'm a big sports guy. I've been a big sports guy my whole life. Like I said, grew up playing baseball. So just, huge football fan, grew up a huge Dolphins, Heat, Panthers fan, everything Miami. So fortunate
Mhm.
that I've been able to, continue to do what I love the last couple years. And was definitely fun couple years here in Lincoln, and in Nebraska for sure too.
It sounds like you're getting ready to leave. Is that so? Are you dipping out of the state real quick here?
Well, we'll see. I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's really much for me left here, so it's not for sure what I have
Yeah,
completely planned yet. But it will be to eventually, get out of the
yeah.
state. I'm fortunate that I started seeing my girlfriend in
There it is.
January, so I'm fortunate she lives right outside of like Gretna Millard area, so I'm fortunate that like I'm not in a complete rush. So I'm actually here
Yeah,
right now. That's where I'm at right now. So I'm a little fortunate. I'm not in like I said, I told you right when we opened the show. I mean, I'm kind of enjoying the little bit of
yeah.
relaxation because I mean, I mean, even on the radio side of things, I mean the calendar, the sports calendar can get it
Well,
grinds down on you, man.
and that's the thing. Okay, so we're kind of going to talk about that. Like, first of all, I apologies on behalf of the listeners for the Florida Panthers and the Miami Heat just completely getting so close and then not being able to pull through for you. Not even one of them. But I guess more on a real note. Like when we talk about the sports calendar, in Lincoln, obviously, as someone that grew up here, it was like, all right, this is I don't want to do anything else other than just cover the Huskers, right?
Mhm.
And this is like the dream, and it is like obviously I'm enjoying every minute of it, but it does wear down. It does wear down on you where you get towards the back end of the season. I used to hate bye weeks in Husker
Yep.
football season, but now it's like, all right, I'm circling that date on the bye week because it's like, all right, when is there a Saturday off?
Yeah, and it's a chance to kind of regroup, I mean, because when
Yeah,
you go hard, those like if they don't have a bye week till week like 7 or whatever it is, I mean, those first 6 weeks are just
yeah.
grueling, and I mean, and then you throw volleyball into the mix too, with obviously how great volleyball is here, and I mean, you throw that in the mix, and it's like just between doing all that and then you're trying to make sure you get the high school stuff covered. I know you do play by play and
Hmm.
stuff as well, so it's like for you, it's like you're double dipping. It's there's just so much going on. But it is like you said. I mean, it wears on you, but it is fun. I mean, getting to say you get to go to Memorial Stadium every Saturday, and you're in
Yeah.
the press box, you're on the field. It's definitely exciting. But I think for people not in the industry, they don't realize like I think it does kind of look like, oh, you just get to go to games all the time. It's fun, and it is fun, and we
Yeah.
we we do love our jobs obviously, but like you said, the hours get a little they stretch you thin a little bit.
What's crazy is I think and this was less like probably for you since you didn't grow up a Nebraska fan necessarily, but like anybody, if you're to go from like this fandom to then hey it's my job now to cover it and I have to look at this as from like a neutral point of view and I can't be a fan and as you
Mhm.
know in press boxes like so weird story like 2021 I went to the Nebraska Oklahoma game in Norman and that was the first game that I went to like a football game where there's a press box and like I sat up in the press box and stuff and when you sit up there it's like they run down the rules it's no cheering no
Yep.
clapping no noise and I would have never thought in a million years that that was like that. I knew like you couldn't be a fan, but I figured, there's probably like a little bit of talking going on. But it's like
Yep.
eerily quiet in the press box during football games because everybody's working. It's a working press box, and like now I understand why. But what's so weird is like there are days where like the Nebraska Iowa game last year. Did you go to Iowa City for that? I can't remember.
I did not. Kevin was there,
Okay, Kevin
so
was there. I,
I
I
was
couldn't
back.
remember
I was
who
back in Lincoln doing the show.
I I couldn't remember who sent or who you guys took up there, but anyway, it was like Nebraska beats Iowa for the first time in seven years, and it's like I really wish I was up in the stands as a fan right now.
Yeah.
And so
And
like
that's
you never realize it until you're like in that moment.
yeah, and it is. It's tough. I mean, like you said, I mean, that's kind of like and that's the hardest part about just covering the team. I think I think it's a little easier to separate yourself when, like I said, like when I went to a place like Montana, you have
Mhm.
no affiliation. I mean, it's easy to separate yourself. But when you grow up, a fan. I mean, that feeling of not being able to like, especially with the Nebraska Iowa rivalry and not being able to get excited. And you
Yeah.
have that in the back of your mind. You see all the fans losing their mind in the stands. You're like, oh, I want to be
Yeah.
in the stands with the fans. I wish I was tailgating. Like those things start to dawn on you a little bit. I have a funny story too. When I was a student journalist, and my senior year, my last year at UCF, my last
Mhm.
semester, I got flown out for free to the Fiesta Bowl when we played LSU.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, and so we're there. I'm out there covering it, having a blast. Like the coolest thing ever. We're in State Farm Stadium,
Mhm.
like for free in the media hotel. What a great experience. But we're in the press box. And again, like you said, work in press box. And this is an NFL stadium. There's a ton of media in this press box.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody remembers this. I like to call it the hit that made Joe Burrow. That hit
Yeah.
in the that he took in that Fiesta Bowl game from Joey
Yep.
Connors, who is now or was on Nebraska's staff, oddly enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, that he threw that interception, and we were running it back, and he Burrow went to go lay the hit, and Connors absolutely annihilated him. And that hit
Yeah.
in the press box, like it was hard for me to not like. I like stood up for a second. I was like, oh, I can't like, because like
Yeah.
you heard that hit. And things like that. It's just super, it's kind of tough to separate yourself when you're covering, but it is kind of fun still to be able to cover a team that and follow a team that you are a fan of. And the other cool thing about being in the media and being in a small market as far as like a place like Montana is you kind of do start to grow some love for like Montana State, right? Like I mean
Yeah.
I follow Montana State all the time now. I mean, I keep up with their football,
Mhm.
I keep up with their basketball, their men's and women's. Like I mean, it's and it's kind of cool because it opens your palate up a little bit to something different. Not that like if Montana State ever plays UCF, I'm hoping UCF wins by 50, but it just kind of opens up that which I think is a cool part about being in the media. It kind of opens things up to being a fan of different things, but also still having that professionalism.
Well, it is also cool because like we develop friendships with people in the media also.
Mhm.
Like obviously there's like this I don't want to talk about how it's like competitive nature that comes out, right? Because nowadays there's not as much about like I'm the first one to break the story, right? Because
Mhm.
especially at a place a lot of times like that Nebraska that has a lot of the media contingent covering it. It's like if one person knows it, chances are somebody else knows it, and it
Yeah.
just depends on whoever tweets it out first or whatever. So it's like there's obviously like a little bit of competitiveness, I suppose, but like for radio and TV, how you and I were basically, it was like, all right, yeah, like there's not really a whole lot of competitiveness. Like we
No.
each have our own lane that we're in, and which like one thing I will say is cool. Like you develop a lot of friendships and relationships because you're hanging out with these guys and you see them at the stadium at on Mondays and you see them on Thursdays and then you see them on Saturdays. And then if
Mhm.
there's a basketball press conference, you throw in that one on Wednesday and you volleyball on Tuesday. Like it's crazy just how quick you can get to know the people in your market. And there's a lot of people in Nebraska's market, obviously. So it's hard not to get to know people. But I do want you to walk the listeners through like the local TV grind, right? Because as I mean, just for ideas, like on press conferences, you guys got to get there way earlier than I do.
Oh yeah.
Like press conferences at 10:30 or whatever. I'm there at probably 10:20, 10:15, and I go in, I sit down, and I get my laptop out, and I'm ready to go. You guys set up cameras. But like you got to make sure your like the white balance is good. You got to make sure everything is in there, and then after that, it's editing and getting ready for the pack. Like just walk listeners through your guys' like day to day with press conferences and with shooting games and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a little interesting, and again, like you said, I'm glad that you brought it up because I don't think people realize that. We get viewer emails sometimes about people who are like, and I think people think there's a lot more of us doing all this than there actually is. Like, there's a
Hmm.
lot of days where it is literally,
Yeah.
it is just me and Kevin, and that's it. And some
Yeah.
days like I'm off and Kevin's by himself, or Kevin would be off and I'd be by myself, and you're
Hmm.
tackling that thing the whole day. So kind of back to like breaking it down. I mean, I'll kind of break you through like a short rundown of like the week, right? In the fall last year, Monday, we have that massive press conference. Frost would speak. John Cook speaks. Arguably two of the most
Hmm.
important people in Nebraska athletics at the time. And then
And
we hear
football
from
players.
yeah, and we hear from players. So Kevin and I would both go, and we'd get there around. We'd probably leave the station at like 10 o'clock. Get there like 10:15, 10:30, like you said. We set everything up, get everything ready to go, and I would actually. Not only do they do podium interviews, they bring out players to the side. So me and Kevin are both
Hmm.
doing interviews at the same time, and then I would also set up for anybody that's watched 10-11 my Know Your Husker segment that I did on the sixth floor of Memorial Stadium. So I'd have to also shoot that, and that wouldn't even run that day. So we'd shoot that
Yeah.
and we'd shoot that. Kevin would usually have to come down and do a package because we would be in our 5, 6, and 10 o'clock shows usually with those Monday press conferences because it's usually the biggest news of the day. Everybody wants to hear from the head
Hmm.
coach in the beginning of the week, right? So like, so me and Kevin like we'll go down, we'll each shoot stand ups, and he'll maybe do a package for the 5, and then I'll do a package for the 6, and he'll anchor the 6. So we go down to the field, we shoot the stand-ups in the stadium somewhere. We try to change it up a little bit so we're on camera. So once we do that, then we get back to the station and like then you're ingesting all the video, trying to piece out like what are we gonna run today, right? Which is hard in its own self. And then we got to produce the show. We got to produce our little part in the 5 o'clock that we're in. We got to produce the whole 6 o'clock sportscast and then the whole 10 o'clock
Hmm.
sportscast. So, and then on top of producing it, then you have to write your scripts and you have to edit all your own video. And that's not even the only stuff that's going on that day. You also have to edit and be aware of the other news that's coming out throughout the day, whether it's stuff with high school
Hmm.
or some of the other Husker athletics things. So that's just a normal Monday. And then you wake up Tuesday and we'd have another or we'd have the coaches. I can't remember if it was Tuesdays where you had coordinators, press
Yeah.
conference.
Tuesdays were coordinators.
Tuesdays you had coordinators press conference, and that was in the morning, and you'd wake up at
Hmm.
so you had a long day on Monday, then you wake up and you're doing another long day on Tuesday because you're starting with those press conferences, and then you get back and you have to do that. Then same thing, you're producing your show, writing it. Wednesday comes along. I would edit my Know Your Husker that on Wednesday. That was usually a bit of a slower day. And then we'd shoot anything else we need to get. Thursday, you're right back to press conferences with players, more like you hear from more players. It's usually offense and defense. So that's another early day Thursday, and then you come in Friday and you have high school football. And Thursday we usually try
Yeah.
Wednesday or Thursday. We would try and if I was off and I was anchoring Friday or whatever, we try to pre-produce our Friday night football show at some point. So when we get
Mm.
in Friday,
Yeah.
that's done because if you try to produce that thing on Friday, or maybe we do it Friday morning before we go in, but again, then your day's still starting at like 9, 10 o'clock
Yeah.
because that's a monster in itself. Friday
Well,
night football.
that's what I was just gonna say is like obviously like I know you and Kevin did a really good job of obviously and the high school sports coverage in Lincoln is like dramatically growing, right? The coverage of these athletes, whether it's on the radio or whether it's on TV. And part of that though is you guys don't have and this is what's crazy and like obviously we're both relatively new, obviously I'm a little newer than you are into this biz,
Yeah.
but like that's one thing I realized and I never had thought about. Like I remember just turning it on at 10:19 p.m. every night and being like, all right, let's check out the high school highlights and
Yep.
not realizing that there's Eddie going from Seacrest to Lincoln Christian to Waverly to Pius back to Seacrest to shoot the end of the game, back to like Lincoln Northwest now. It's the same guy and only to then hey turn around and go I got to be on air in 30 minutes. I got to be
Hmm.
ready to go in 35 minutes and all that. It, it's just crazy to think about the bouncing back and forth on Friday nights especially just to give these players and the athletes and coaches the coverage that they deserve. That's obvious, right? And so it's a lot, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and that's number one, right? And I know like so we show like maybe 30 seconds per game,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the biggest thing is to get kids on TV, right? And give these, the kids who work so hard coverage, right? But like I mean you touched on it, like those Friday nights are, it's a lot. And when we get emails, like sometimes we'll mess up a score here and there. Like again, it goes back to like people think
Yeah.
that like, well, how did you mess that up? And it's like, well, it is like two or three of us trying to shoot,
Mm-hmm.
we will show 15, 16 games,
Yeah.
and there's times where we won't get back till like 9:35, and you're trying
Yeah.
to like, you're ingesting the 3 or 4 games that you shot. And then we're also, we have sister stations at WWT in Omaha and KSMB in Hastings. So they'll shoot some of the games and we have to get their content also and re-edit their content to how it'll work in our show. Like obviously if Omaha West Side's playing Lincoln East and Lincoln
Yeah.
East has 3 touchdowns, we're not going to show as many of the Omaha West Side touchdowns because we're a Lincoln market, right? We want the Lincoln East. So like,
Mm-hmm.
but while T's highlights are going to look different than ours. So not only are we editing and writing all these scripts for the games that me and Kevin and maybe an intern or two went and shot, then we come back and we have to rework 3 or 4 other games from our sister stations. And again, this is all it's like 9:35, and all of a sudden you get to 9:45, and it's just like you keep looking at the clock, and next thing you know, it's 10 o'clock. And
Yeah.
our Friday night football show, we picked up at 10:15. I mean, like we were
Mm-hmm.
half of the 10:11's 10 o'clock sportscast. So like
Yeah.
it's like 10:13, and we are like still getting things online, and I don't think people
Yeah.
realize the craziness. I know we've tweeted about it before. Like Nicole Griffith, when she was here, tweeted about it. Kevin's
Yeah.
tweeted about it. There's a lot that goes into those Friday night shows, and the behind the scenes, obviously on air, you don't realize that. Like you said, you tune in, you're just like, oh, it's great. Let's see what
Yeah.
happened in the games tonight, and it's like for us, it's a lot, and it's a lot of running around. It's a lot of tight deadlines. I mean, that's kind of how this business is. We're on
Mm-hmm.
deadline a lot of the times, and we do our best. And I like to think that we put out a lot of really good shows and we showcased a lot of great athletes. So I mean, it's fun, but it's an adrenaline rush. And for anybody that, I don't know if any younger listeners too that want to get in the industry,
Yeah.
you gotta love that adrenaline rush, man. I love it. That
Oh,
feeling of
for
when it's
sure.
10:13 and 10:14, and I don't even have my button down shirt on yet. I'm still in my polo that I was shooting in, and like I'm writing my last little
Mm-hmm.
script up, and then I send it up, and then I'm boom, throwing my shirt on really quick, tying my tie really quick, and put my IFB on and sprinting out there. That adrenaline rush is pretty fun. Sometimes you're a little out of breath the first couple highlight reads, which is a little makes it
Yeah.
a little tough, but it's fun, man.
Okay, so I want to get your. We're gonna go through a little story time. The biggest adrenaline rush that you've had, what? Because like that's a real thing, and I didn't realize that it was a real thing, and how much I loved it. And as sad as it is to say, like one of them was when Scott Frost got fired, and it was like,
Oh yeah,
okay, all hands on like Georgia Southern, and I like that. So there's two actually this last football season for myself, and it was Georgia Southern. It was like, all right, you're watching the game, and obviously I did the post game show immediately after the game where it's the call in show, and we're having obviously the conversations of like, or you go into that Georgia Southern game on like the pregame show that I was doing, like we had, obviously like all of us had talked at press conferences and it was like, they're not going to lose to Georgia Southern or whatever it is, and we're going to the
well,
pregame show like this
you
thing's.
knew if they lost, he was probably gone.
Yes, well, and that's the thing, and so you're like, all right, so you'd have that, you have like the whole buyout thing looming as well. That was a couple weeks later, and so you're sitting there going, all right, well, you don't think Nebraska's going to lose to Georgia Southern, and then you're watching that game and you're seeing this slow, like the time just trickle down. You're like, okay, crap, like I need to get in this mindset of, and this is maybe a little bit
They're gonna
different for
lose.
radio than TV, but like you need to get in this mindset of like, how am I going to talk about this, or how are we going to present this to a Nebraska fan? And then on top of that, then it's okay, they actually lost. Now let's go on a post game show. Let's talk about this. And I know you guys do stand ups and they're not always recorded, they're live a lot of the times after games from the stadium. And so it's like one of these things. And then it's the next morning, you're just kind of like waiting for that media email that we get where it's like, all right, it's official. So like that
Yeah.
was one of them. And then the next one was at Iowa on Black Friday. we had like gotten wind right before the game started that, hey, Matt Rule's the new head coach, like Matt Rule's going to be, stuff like
Yep.
that. And I remember thinking like, holy crap, there's going to be a press conference tomorrow morning, or we're going to go on air tomorrow morning or whatever. And because they're going to do this right away. And it was like, all right, we got back in the car after the game at Iowa City, and I was like, we're booking it back to Lincoln. Got up the next morning, we were all on the air at like 7:30 talking about Matt Rule when it came out. And it was like that adrenaline rush of like, this is happening, and
Yeah.
you either are part of it or you're going to miss out, and you do not want to miss out.
No, and you always talk about those breaking major news days, right? Those big news days, those news dumps, like those are the days that like you want to make sure you're on your A game, but it's tough when, like you said, I mean, you're in Iowa, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, we got to get back to Lincoln and get this ready to go because with this Matt Rule stuff that's coming out, and you want to be able to, like you said, you want to be a part of it. You can't like lollygag and be like, nah, we killed it at Iowa. We're just gonna we'll pass on the Matt Rule. Like you can't, you got to be in on it. Like you said, it's competitive too. You don't want to get beat out by anybody else who's going to be on air talking about that type of stuff. As far as my stories, I'll give you a bad example and then a good one. The bad one is that Georgia Southern game, actually. So we that game ended super late, Lincoln time. It was like 10-17 when that game ended, when they when they missed the field goal, and I'm sprinting, like I'm on the sideline. I sprint to the middle of the field. I had my tripod set up on the other end because I was going to go live. I sprint to the middle of the field to get Scott Frost handshake, because I knew when he lost, I was like, Scott Frost is getting fired this weekend. We knew it was going to happen. Like if they lost. So I sprint to get Scott Frost because I'm like, this is the last time he's ever going to walk off the field. So I'm in a dead sprint with our big camera on my shoulder. I get Scott Frost with the handshake with the Georgia Southern coach. And then I'm sprinting in front of Scott Frost to try and get him walking back into the tunnel, right? Because you're like, that's the shot, right? Like Scott Frost walking off the field for the last time. Meanwhile, I have my AirPods in my ear with our show going on, so I can talk to our producer and I can know what's going on. They hear me sprinting. I get that shot. Then I have to sprint to the other side of the field. I throw my camera on the tripod. Kevin's like just getting into highlights, or he's just wrapping up the highlights because the game ended like perfect timing. I'm trying to like get my TVU turned on, and like I'm out of breath. I just did full gashes, running 100-yard sprints. And I get myself up and the camera's set up. I'm sitting there. I can't breathe. And it wasn't our cleanest show because we had to go off air. We actually, unfortunately, and this is one of like me and Kevin's biggest, like we hated this. Like we were so angry that this happened. We weren't allowed to extend our show that day. So like we had to be off at 10:30. So Kevin kind of finished the highlights. It was getting later. It's like almost 10:30 literally at this point. And they kind of take me live. I didn't know they were taking me live. I'm like trying to talk. I'm so out of breath. I don't even remember what I said. My adrenaline's through the roof. I don't think I made any sense at all, really. And then Kevin kind of wrangled us back in. And then the goal was we wanted Scott Frost live on air. I mean, that was like the moneymaker, right? Scott Frost live on air for the last time. We knew that was going to be the last time he was, and we could have, the last time he spoke as Nebraska's head coach, we could have had him live on air, and it didn't happen. And it's one of me and Kevin's, like, we talked about it before, actually a couple weeks ago before my last day. And like, it's one of me and Kevin's like most frustrating days because we just like, we could have just killed it and we didn't, But as far as killing it, similar, I flew out to New Jersey when I covered the Rutgers game. Similar thing, tight game, came down to the wire. I'm running back and forth to the media workroom out in New Jersey and Piscataway, and I'm editing these highlights, like trying to, like, as soon as like Nebraska scored, like in the fourth quarter, I sprinted off the field. I added that to the highlight thing, came back out, got the next play, ran back in. Like as soon as the game ended, I was able to send Kevin his clean highlights for the show. I already had my tripod set up in the press conference room. I threw the camera on there. I hit record. We had the TVU attached to it, and I just framed it up and I ran out to the field with a phone. We have a work phone that has a live app that we can like go live from. I plugged the mic into that, and so now I'm sitting on the field, like Kevin's already in show again. I have my AirPods in, I'm listening, and they're like, "Hey, can you get out there to the field?" I'm like, "I'll be out there in like 20 seconds." And adrenaline's going. This one was a lot smoother. Our show came out great.
Yeah.
This was also Friday night, so on top of this Rutgers coverage, or like first Nebraska, we had high school football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I run out, I do my live shot. I run back into the room to make sure the thing's framed up. I come back out and there's players walking out. I get Nick Henrich and I'm like, "Yo, you want to do a live interview really quick?" So I'm talking to Kevin in my ear. I'm like, "Hey, I got Nick Henrich. Because we had the podium live. And like Mickey Joseph is talking. And so like now Nick Henrich is out. I'm like, "Yo, we can do Nick Henrich live on air after the big win." They just won. It was like the first time they won back-to-back Big Ten games in like 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and it was a come from behind. It was a come from behind win too.
Yeah, it was awesome. And again, the adrenaline's just through the roof. This is like, I mean, we're all tight on deadline. The show looked great. To this day, I think in our time here, Kevin, my 2 years here, Kevin said it was definitely our best Huskers show that we had, Husker football coverage show. It was just a really great show. But yeah, that adrenaline rush of just, and again, I'm in Rutgers by myself.
Yeah.
For there with me. I mean, I'm literally set up on to go live on a phone, and the camera is in the press conference room. Like, you're doing all this by yourself. And again, it's a lot of work, but it's also fun. I mean, I kind of love shooting too. I got that Trey Palmer touchdown at Rutgers. He literally like slid into my lap on that great catch that he made. So those are my two stories about as far as like the adrenaline rush. One good and looked awful on air. The other one, kind of redeemed myself a little bit at Rutgers.
Okay, Eddie, last one before we go ahead and let you go. We're talking to Eddie Messel, formerly a 10-11 sports reporter here in Lincoln, spent some time at Bozeman, Montana, graduated from UCF. All right, just in an overarching kind of umbrella, just talk about your time in Lincoln, right? Because obviously before, I mean, I didn't know you before, and we met through a mutual friend, obviously, and shout out to Nathan Brennan, because we met through him and stuff like that. Now he's killing it down in KC. I mean, just talk about your time in Lincoln and through everything, like the high school sports, the Huskers, the Salt Dogs. I mean, through everything, it's a grind. But dude, I mean, as we've just talked about our stories, like it's so much fun, and it's like it's I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it's a blast. So just talk about it, just kind of before we wrap it up here.
Oh man, my time in Lincoln. It was just such a blast. Again, I love the job, and Kevin taught me so much, and I grew as a sports anchor, and just the community. And everybody talks about how great the Midwest is and how nice everybody is, especially in Nebraska. And I mean, like living here, the viewers and everybody. I think that's what made it fun for me too. On top of getting to do all the cool stuff and covering the sports and going to the events, it's the community that really made Lincoln enjoyable for me. Like everybody. I mean, I go out to games. I'm out at the gym. I'm out at the grocery store, just walking around downtown. I get people coming up to me nonstop, and people love 10-11 and they watch all the time. And that's really what made it fun to me. And everybody wanted to sit down and talk like Husker football, and even high school. The amount of high school conversations I've had, like with just people all over the community, and they're just like, "Hey, like, who do you think about, who do you think is going to take it in basketball in the capital city this year?" And I'm like, you go down these rabbit holes of just talking high school basketball and high school football and baseball with all the viewers. And I think that was something for me that I really enjoyed, was just how great and how involved.
Oh, we may have lost Eddie, but no, we'll go ahead and we can just go ahead and wrap it up. And if Eddie rejoins us, sounds like we might have Eddie here in just a moment. We'll go ahead and take him off the stream if he ends up joining. No, I mean it's just been a blast. But no, Eddie is an awesome guy. It looks like he's going to reconnect to the stream before we get out of here. But once again, just want to shout out Carpe Diem team in Nebraska Realty for all their support throughout this. Whether you're looking for a new place to call home or trying to sell your current home, you want to make it as easy as possible. So use a realtor that works hard so you don't have to. Give them a call today, 402-429-8121 for all your residential and commercial needs. And we're back with Eddie Messel, All right, go ahead, Eddie. Continue, man. You got cut off there.
Yeah, I was getting a FaceTime call and it ruined the whole thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, like I mean, just again, just the community, how great everybody was. That made it so much fun, and the high school, just immersing. Me and Kevin talked about it on my last day, and what he really appreciated was the fact of how, because obviously Kevin's been here a long time, and he really appreciated how much I immersed myself into the Lincoln community. You could come somewhere knowing you're only going to be there for 2 years because of your contract, and like you could kind of just half-ass your way through it. I mean, but what really makes this job fun is if you immerse yourself in it, even with the high school stuff. I mean, how many times I went to Parkview Christian to watch football or basketball, and that is, one of the tiniest schools, and I love going there. It was awesome, and the people are great, coaches are great, and that whole thing of just being able to sit down and talk with anybody about, these high school kids, and that community feeling is what's I really enjoyed most about Lincoln. And then obviously getting the chance to cover Nebraska just as a whole, I can't complain. Obviously, we didn't see as many wins as I probably would have, liked to cover. It's more fun to cover when you're cover a team when they're winning. But man, I got introduced to volleyball. I was never a big volleyball fan, really. When I came here, and this community, going to Devaney Center is one of the coolest things I think anybody can do. I mean, what they do on Cook has built there is the most impressive thing ever. And it just really was. I'm truly blessed. I've learned a lot in my time here in Lincoln, and couldn't have asked for a better 2 years, and made a lot of really good friends. Obviously, you and Nathan being two of them. And it really was amazing. And again, all the coaches and athletes that let me tell stories, and all the kids who reach out to me on Twitter and they interact, that part of it is what really made me enjoy this job. And I got a lot more of that here than I did in my.
Oh no, we lost Eddie's sound.
Because in a lot of communities.
There you go.
And
we lost your sound.
We
lost your sound. Yeah, we're good. We're back.
Yeah. The other cool thing is just how invested everybody is in the local media here, because it's not like that everywhere. You hear about how local media sometimes is dying, or it's and that's not the case here in Lincoln. People love their local news, and they love their local sports, and it really, it's market 105 in the TV market rankings, but I would say it's a lot higher than that for the amount of people that really do care and watch. And again, couldn't have asked for a better stint here the last 2 years.
That is Eddie Messel. Eddie, my man, appreciate you sitting down and hanging out with me for 40 minutes or so. Gonna miss the weekly fist bumps at press conferences. Gonna miss that, all the late nights and stuff at high school sports as well, man. Appreciate you. It's been a blast these last 2 years. I'm looking forward to continuing to follow you wherever you go, my man. So appreciate it. Once again, that's Eddie Messel, formerly a 1011 sports guy. Still got some stuff on the horizon, so make sure you check him out. Eddie Messel TV on Twitter. Is that right, Eddie?
Yep, Eddie Messel TV. And so once I got everything planned out, you guys, I'll let everyone know. I got a lot of emails and messages about where I'm going, so I'll let everybody know on Twitter once everything's finalized.
So there it is. Once again, Eddie Messel. Appreciate him hanging out with me here on Nick and Friends. Once again, shout out to Carpe Diem team in Nebraska Realty. Give them a call, 402-429-8121 for all your residential and commercial needs. Another episode of Nick and Friends in the books. Stick around. We'll have another one next Friday, 6 p.m. here every single week right here, 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.